So today is Tuesday, September 27th, 2016, and we are interviewing Dr. Wayne Temple at the Illinois State Library in Springfield. Dr. Temple, how old are you today?
92.
92.
As of last February 5.
92 years old. And February the 5th is your birthday.
Right. The same as Nancy Hanks Lincoln, the president's mother.
My name is Mark Schaefer, and I'm going to be the interviewer today, and Kathy Folks will be our court reporter for this interview. So for us, would you please state for the recording what war and branch of service you served in?
I served in World War II, and I was in an elite special branch of the Signal Corps called Army Communications Service Plant Engineering Agency. And in civilian times, that's run as a civilian group with headquarters at 17th and Sampson Streets in Philadelphia. But when war comes, it becomes part of the Signal Corps. And we worked in 12-man teams or sometimes 10 all over the world. And it's such a small group that our battalion commander in Europe was just a major, Major Dan Whitaker. The commander all over the world was Colonel Will Parker in Philadelphia, bird colonel. And that's why it was so hard to get anything pushed up. We had no general officers in there. And when I got a special site commendation letter for my action under fire at the Rhine River as we were going out to put in ice communication, it stayed there until years later when the Army was going through it, and they said, oh, that's Bronze Star rank. So that's when I got the Bronze Star later. Mm-hmm. That happened a lot of times.
Sure, sure.
In World War II, I know Pershing at the end of the war said, I think some of the Distinguished Service Crosses should be Medals of Honor when they went back and looked over.
Right.
So that was a similar case.
So even before that, where were you born?
I was born on a small farm of less than 100 acres along State Route 4 in Thompson Township of Delaware County, Ohio, on the 5th of February in 1924. And my father was Howard Milton Temple. He was a farmer, and previous to that had carried ice in Marion, Ohio. Knew the Hardings well when he carried ice to their place, President Harding, you know. And my mother was Ruby March Calhoun Temple, and she was a school teacher. And needless to say, she had me at my ABCs and so forth when I could toggle.
Did you have any siblings?
No siblings.
No siblings?
They took a look at me and said, that's enough, you know. Said,
was your father in the military?
No.
So a little bit more about when you were growing up. On a farm, did you think that would be your path in life? Or?
No. I never liked farming, but I was always devoted to my dad, and he knew that I was not cut out to be a farmer. And I'd come home in the summers from college and help me farm. I always helped him, but and when he finally said, whatever you do, just be a good one. And so I tried to do that.
So what were you doing before you entered into the service?
I was at Ohio State University, living in the Buckeye Club with the athletes and the scholarship. I had a scholarship. I was valedictorian in my high school. And a good track man, but those days they wanted track men for football. But I never had to touch the ball, but I was there just 2 quarters. But I was a corporal. That was my pride and joy. The one book I studied at Ohio State was my manual on ROTC field artillery. First 75 Frenches and then the 105 howitzer. And I, as I said, obtained the corporal rank. And just there 2 quarters and was drafted into the Army Air Corps. Mm-hmm. And almost finished up basic training, and the Army decided they wanted engineers. So they pulled me out and sent me to a recruiting area, assemblage area, I should say, at Raleigh, North Carolina, at North Carolina State. And we put a troop train together, and I woke up, I was at Champaign, Illinois, to study engineering. And so I was there till I completed that course in engineering, and then they shipped me to Camp Crowder, Missouri, Signal Corps School to study basic things that we needed. And when we finished, we were qualified to maintain diesel generators, pole line construction, cable splicing, anything that you could do. We could take a 10-man team or 12-man team and go in and put a complete air base in, blown off steel tower, beam ranges, T4 transmitters, and the whole works.
Mhm.
And so when I shipped overseas on the Queen Mary, by the way, I think there was about 18,000 troops on the Mary.
Wow.
And when we landed, we were a special little group, and they wanted to put us in the infantry. They said, no, this bunch is going to put in ice communications when he moves his headquarters from Metz, France, up to Frankfurt am Main on the Rhine River. And so we had a difficult time getting in there because we couldn't get in until they took the place. So we were in there when it was quite a bit of action going on, and that's when going in there is when I received my commendation to got the Bronze Star.
What date did you ship over to Europe?
It was toward the end of the war, and we must not have gone till almost March of '45. About March, I'm thinking. I have records at home, but I didn't look at them. About March. But I think we stopped in Paris, which was our headquarters for all of Europe. We stopped there maybe 2 days to get our laundry done and get something to eat and get our equipment ready. We had all kinds of line trucks. We had boring equipment, we had about 20 tons of equipment we took up there. I might mention here something I don't think has ever been on the record. To keep Franco happy in Spain, we sent 2 teams down there, civilian clothes and all the army trucks and everything painted black. I don't think everybody's ever mentioned that. Yeah, that was a sort of a behind-the-scene thing. By the way, we all had top-secret clearance. Because we handled all the like stuff, all the communication, the teletype stuff. So it was quite an experience. And I've forgotten all the nasty things, hard thing. I only remember the funny things. So we put in Frankfurt am Main. And then we went up to Kassel, Germany. The war's about over then, and we put in a base up there for Black Widow fighters. That looked like a P-38 but larger. 2-man ship. Tremendous fighting plane. And when I was up in Germany with the team, of course, when Germany surrendered, and we came back to Paris and put in further installations at Orly Field. So when you fly into Orly today, you'll see some of our work there. Then south of Paris at Villacoublay, we put that in. Then a beam range at Domfront up in France near the Normandy Peninsula. My buddy and I came back, and evidently we had curried some favor with the major because Whittaker said, would you two mind taking a little vacation down in Switzerland? We said, Switzerland? War is on. No, he said, well, we made an arrangement, special thing. So and we took the train down to Mulhouse and then crossed into Switzerland. And I think we had 10 days there. And the one thing I remember about it, when we got to Lucerne, you've all read about the great lion of Lucerne that's carved in the solid rock there, dedicated to the Swiss guards that protected the king and were slaughtered to the very end. It's a very moving statue. The lion is there with his mouth open. There's a spear thrust to him. And as you all have heard, every place you went, there was always a sign that said Kilroy was here. Kilroy was here. And some GI, of course, we had flyers interned in Switzerland that had been shot down but managed to glide into Switzerland. And the Swiss interned them, put them in hotel shells. And my buddy and I went down to see the lion and take some pictures. And in those days, we didn't do graffiti and paint all over some national monument, but some GI had taken a plaque of paper, and he had written this on it. It says, my heart leaps up and bounds with joy, for I stood here before Kilroy. And in the National World War II Memorial in Washington, there are 2 places hidden where they have the sign of Kilroy and it says Kilroy was here. That's hidden in the memorial, which I thought I'd been down there to see that. It was very, very touching. So we had quite a nice time. The one thing I remember was real fun. When we first hit Paris, we were in what I termed a high school building on the Quai de Valmy at the Juarez subway stop. And the French were very glad to see us because we had candy and one thing and another. And they gave me a lifetime Metro pass. But the French got tired of having some of their downtown buildings occupied, so they moved us out to the Porte d'Orléans on the south gate. And we had a square city block. And in there was a theater. And we came back from some heavy work in Germany, reconstruction stuff, and working up airports. And the major confined everybody to the barracks. There was a big sign on the board that morning. It's Christmas, you're confined tonight. And we were bitching about it. And so we assembled over in the theater, and he said, you wondered why I confined you to the base tonight? No. He said, well, you don't got to cost you any money. The Folies Bergère is playing for you on our stage. That I remember.
Mhm.
So what a wonderful experience. I was in the Army of Occupation, of course, and I didn't get out till 46.
Where were you when the surrender happened?
When the surrender happens, I was up at Kassel, Germany. But I happened to be back in Paris when the Japanese surrendered. We flew in. I had A1 flying priority. I'd bust anybody out but a general officer. And we were back at Paris when the Japanese surrendered, and they put an impromptu parade together, and I never will forget that. I showed my wife. I've taken her back to Paris, showed her where I've been at. And we walked 16 men abreast down the Champs-Élysées with the bands and everything. And so I wasn't there when they captured Paris, but I was sure there when they formed their columns and marched down there. What a thrilling sight, you know. And the French were very, very appreciative, of course. The girls were out hugging and kissing and so forth, just like when they first hit the place. So it was a memorable experience for me, and of course gave me the Bill of Rights. I came back from the war, and I drove the car down to the Buckeye Club, which is built right in the stadium. And you know, even though I hadn't touched the football, I was there on a scholarship. So, and I knew all the guys, and I walked up the steps, and I couldn't find anybody, and I was late getting back, 46. And I ran into the chef, Chef Barnett. We always called him Stuff, because if you asked him what was for supper, he'd say, I'm fixing you guys some stuff. So I said, Stuff, where's all the guys? He said, they're not coming back. Said, most of them killed. And that proved to be true. And so all those great stars, gone. So I drove back, and Dad said, what are you going to do now? And I said, well, it's full of ghosts. I'll never get back. And he said, why don't you go back to Illinois? Do you like it there? I said, it's a great school. better professors than Ohio State, because if you want to play football, you go to Ohio State. You know, if you want to play scholarship, you go to Illinois.
It's still like that today.
You've seen that, right? You've seen Illinois' football record in the past. They'll do better now if they got Lovie Smith. But so in these days, it's so much easier than now. And I called the registrar in person. And I said, would you take me back this fall? I was there in the Army and finished out a degree in engineering. And he said, just a minute. And I could hear him go through the cards, magic cards, you know, not computers. And he pulled the card. He said, I could hear the cards. And he said, of course, we'd be tickled to have you back. And I said, one more favor. He said, what is it? We're trying to be good to the veterans. I said, could you get me some housing? He said, sure, I'll put you in the ice rink. I said, well, I've done everything there but skate. When I was there in the Army, it was our mess hall. So that was fine. And of course, the people that had never been in the service, they made fun of us when we were in the ice rink in double-decker beds with steel lockers. But I said, well, you may laugh about it, but there's one thing we're all grateful for. We're not sleeping in the mud, and as far as we know, nobody's shooting at us. That wouldn't apply today, because on campuses you could get shot at. But in those days, that was unheard of, really. I don't recognize this new world. I really don't. So that was my thought. So I had the GI Bill, and I came back as a sophomore using my engineering credits, and decided that I didn't want to major. What I had at Ohio State was chemistry, but history was what I loved. So I came back, and I met Professor Randall. He was the dean of the Lincoln Scholars, well known at that time, wrote so many books. And He remembered me because I'd had a course with him in history. We took everything when they were in engineering, every geography, history, so as well as math and so forth. He remembered me, and we became quite good friends. And when he was sick or out of town, he let me teach his classes as an undergrad. And when I graduated in '49, he said, "Would you be my research assistant?" What a thrill. The Dean of the Lincoln Scholars. I'm going to be his research assistant. My GI Bill's about run out. So there I am. I'm going to draw a salary and get my education too. So I worked with him and I got my master's in history, 1951. He died on me in 1953. And the chairman of the department, Professor S.C. Dietz, was a very good friend of mine. And he said, "What are you going to do now, Wayne?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And he said, "I pulled you back on the teaching staff." So here I am as a grad student, and I'm on the teaching staff until I finish that. And it was a great thrill. I finished up in 1956, but I came to Springfield here in 1954. I was writing on my dissertation, and the director of the State Museum is Dr. Thorne Dewell, very distinguished scholar, PhD, University of Chicago in anthropology, a bird colonel from West Point that flew in World War II in the China-Burma-India theater. And he insisted I write the history of Indians for him. And I said, "Dr. Dewell, my field is Lincoln. I've been promised a job at the University of Iowa when I finish." And he said, "No, you're going to write the Indian. You read French and German." I said, "Yeah." "Name your price." And being a real smart aleck, how the GIs are when you first come back from the war. And I named an outrageous price. And I said, "I'm going to live in a hotel and charge it per diem." And he said, "When can you start?" I said, "What?" Dietz jumped up and said, "Let me write his damn book. You run this full department." But having given my word, I came to Springfield on the 1st of September 1954. And on the top floor of the old Centennial Building was where the museum was at that time. And I wrote the book, which is still in print, and now it's been put on the web at the time. And I finished that up, and he said, "You can stay here the rest of your life." And I said, "I think I'll go back to college teaching." And about that time, I met Ralph Newman right in the middle of the street at Capitol and Fifth. And he was chairman of the board at Lincoln Memorial University, a private school, well endowed. And he said, "Have you finished the Indian book?" And I said, "Yes, thank God." He said, "Would you like to be John Wingate Wheat's chair of history at LMU?" And I said, "Sure." Didn't even ask him the salary. He said, it's adequately endowed. It's endowed for Harding's Secretary of War." And he said, "His whole estate is yours at the end of the year. Whatever it earns, that's yours." And they managed to somehow, I was the first PhD in history that they'd had there for Lincoln people. And I never got a bill for my housing. I had 2 free passes, one for my wife and myself at the dining hall. And how do you spend the money, So,
You didn't, they didn't call you back for Korea?
no, they did not. I was called, they gave me a notice. I was going to look it up for you, and I couldn't find it. I had not stayed in the reserves. The ones that wanted to stay in the reserves protect their rank. I was a T3. It's an unusual rank to talk about, but anytime there's a letter or a figure with stripes, that's a half a step up from what that was. If you're a staff sergeant, you got 3 up in a rocker. For T3, they put a T right in that space between the rocker and the stripes. You're just a little step up. So people don't know much about T3, but that's what it is. And I used to tell the girls I had monogrammed stripes, because T for temple, was that right. Stuff. So they did not call me back. Some of my friends did in grad school, and they called him, 51, they called him. And one of them was killed over there. But one of my good friends, I don't know how he'd been over there as an advisor or something. He had been in Korea in World War II. Imagine that. I didn't know we had troops there, but he said he did. And they gave him a lieutenant's commission and sent him to Korea. And he knew the terrain, and he walked his bunch out, and they were not captured. So he came back to campus alive. Lee Scammellhorn, quite a distinguished man, though. And no, they didn't call me back from Korea. So I finished up there, and I enjoyed it. I was department head down there, and head of the department, and director of the Department of Lincoln, and edited the Lincoln Herald, was the oldest Lincoln magazine. It's a quarterly. It's not in a little sheet. And I had on the board people like Carl Sandburg, Alan Nevins, and so forth. We put out a good matter. I got a call from Ted Cassidy at the State Archives, and he said, Marion Pratt has died. She'd been one of the editors of the collected works of Lincoln, and he said, we'd like to have you back at the archives here to take her place to handle our Lincoln material. So there again, I was ready to come back to Springfield, so I came back in 1964. Never regretted it, because it's a wonderful place to do research. I've done between 8 and 9 books on Lincoln since then. My Skeptic to Prophet has been picked twice as one of the 100 best books ever done on Lincoln since 1865. It's in the 3rd edition. I've just finished out last October my book on Lincoln's surgeons, which has to do with the assassination. It's going in the 2nd edition. And we're waiting now to get proof on my latest one, which is Lincoln and his Pittsfield friends, which included John Hay, Milton Hay, and John George Nicolay, and others that were so close to Lincoln. You know, that Hay and Nicolay were his secretaries in the first term of Lincoln's administration. So I've really had a ball, and I sometimes feel like Private Ryan in the Saving Private Ryan. When Ryan comes back long after the war to visit the captain who gave his life to save him, and he told the captain, he said, I guess I've been a good man, because that's the last thing you said before you died was just be a good man. We've expended a lot of people hiding you. So I sort of feel in that category. Something protected me all those times to get me back to do something worthwhile. But I'm still sad about all my colleagues, young, vigorous men, athletes, and scholars, not just athletes, but great scholars. They're gone, they're gone. So,
how often or how many times have you been back to Europe?
We've been back to Europe. When I married her, she's just a kid. She doesn't even remember World War II. And I served in it. And I told her when we married 37 years ago, my wife died and her husband was dead. And I sort of seduced her to get married. And I said, now, honey, we're going to get you a passport. We're going to travel all over the world while we can. The first 6 years, we're in 28 different countries. So she's been back, and she's been to Paris, and she's looked at all the places I was. She's been up in Germany, cruised the Rhine, all those places, England, France, Scotland.
That's okay. That's all right. Yeah, take a drink.
And I've tried to show her the places that were sort of sacred to me.
Were they easily recognizable to you after all those years of going back?
The thing that the first I noticed at Frankfurt am Main, when I left, it was mostly rubble. But the Bahnhof, the train station, existed, but the roof had been damaged. And there's one thing you can say about the Germans, to their great benefit. They're very industrious. They had somehow saved the plans that were not bombed or destroyed. They had rebuilt Frankfurt, and they'd put a roof on the train station, the Bahnhof. So Germany was pretty well rebuilt. There were some places in France who had been pretty devastated and hadn't yet been completed. Of course, Paris was an open city, so when I could get her to Paris, I'd show her where I used to sit when I'd have a time off down on the Champs-Élysées, just watching the people, or so forth. Paris, of course, was not injured, but so many other places in France were destroyed.
How many, have you stopped and thought about how many different countries during World War II that you were in?
Well, in World War II, of course, we crossed on the Queen Mary, and it took, as I went back to look at my records last night, I think it took us 7 days. We had about 18,000 troops on board. We were sleeping 5 high on that ship. And we did zigzag course, avoid submarines, and we sailed clear up to Greenock, which is the port for Glasgow. and then on a quick train trip down through Scotland and England to Le Havre. When we crossed there and we went down landing ropes, the port had still been all messed up. So I was there. Then France and Germany were the main places where I was actually fighting.
Did you make it to, were you in Belgium at all?
Just through the corner there. We didn't put any stations in Belgium. But we did just such good work. Our main job while the war was still in the height and Ike was coming up from Metz to Frankfurt am Main. My buddy and I were pretty skilled cable splicers, and we had to put that whole base in, and the ground was so bad we laid pure steel, this for runway. And we were in a heck of a hurry because I wanted to be up there. And when we unpacked our stuff that had still been crated from the States, that we brought among that 20 tons of equipment, we opened our reel of lead cable, and we found it was in pieces. Well, he and I were both skilled cable splicers. We can not only connect the wires and everything and solder them, but we could put the sleeve on them, And we found they hadn't any sleeves, so we stripped lead from the cable and soldered it all together to make sleeves, and then we put it in and wiped on both ends and so forth and made it tight. And we just had it in and had the range up, and we got a message from the tower that Ike's plane, he flew in a C-47. And they never said Ike's aboard, it's a VIP and stuff. And he said, I'm over the Rhine Valley and I'm in such terrible fog that I'm not sure where I am. And I said, well, Captain, we've got the beam range in. It's just in. Now, you remember your training? Yeah, vaguely. And I said, well, you maneuver left and right, and if you find dots, you're on the left. If you find dashes, you're on the right. And when you maneuver to it's just a steady hum, you're on the beam. Just follow that in, and we'll be waiting for you. And I said, it's clear here.
So it's a homing beacon for the
air beam range.
airfield.
Yeah. He was so happy when he came. He came in and shook hands with all of us. That's the first time I'd met him in person. I did a little book later called A Splice for Eisenhower, and he never forgot me after that. And of course, he was in and out of there all the time at air base. Another strange thing that happened is he set up his actual headquarters in the I.G. Farben buildings, and it's a group of I showed it to her, small white building, beautiful design, and they were never touched. And I finally learned after the war why. I.G. Farben and DuPont were in a cartel, and it was untouched. They never bombed those buildings. But we learned a lot about Ike from just his aides running in and out of the airport. We'd heard what was going on. And so,
Mm-hmm.
so I'd like to put a rest to the rumors that got around, and the press was always sure that Eisenhower was sleeping with Captain Kay Summersby. She was a British citizen, and Churchill had picked her out especially to drive Ike when he was in London because of the fog. She knew the streets like she did her hands, and she was a tremendous Jeep driver for Ike. And everybody say, oh, he's sleeping with Kay. And I said, I don't think so. And all we knew from we could get with the guy, every time she had finished driving, she slept with the nurses in their barracks. And fortunately, before this lady died, she was I forgot her name. She was a bird colonel in the U.S. Nurses Corps, regulars. And she said, I can swear that when Kay was not with the general driving, she was sleeping with us and the nurses. And I said exactly what I said, So, you know how the press is sometimes.
Sure.
They're always trying to blacken his name. But Ike made me too well, I should say, to ever have betrayed her like that. A great guy. In my personal opinion, Ike wasn't the greatest field general there ever was, but my opinion is he could get a group sitting around a table to agree to do something. That he had plenty of statistics and planners and stuff that could do those things for him. But Ike's great forte was getting people to agree, and he liked everybody, and like myself, I'm a T3, and he treated me just like he would a lieutenant general who would come in there, Very respectful to him. He never called him Ike. It was always the general, So Could I jump past the war a little and tell you a story we've never told?
Sure.
When I kept in touch with him, as you can see, and I never asked for anything. He asked once through his staff if I needed anything, and I said no, but I would like his picture and uniform the way I remember him. He said, oh, it'll be in the mail in a couple of days, and that's when I got that. He finished up his second term, and he of course retired. And I either read in the paper or some interview or heard a little tidbit from TV where this person talking to Eisenhower heard him say, rather sadly, he said, there's nothing to call an ex-president but Mr. And he was a proud West Pointer. And I said, I think I know his character from the association, not just personal, but when we watched what he did. And I believe it was Senator Dirksen that I had a speaking acquaintance with. And I said to Senator, you know, from the tone of that, Ike misses his 5-star rank. And I believe he would be overjoyed if you would restore his, he resigned his 5 stars, which many people wouldn't have done when he ran for president, not when he was elected, but when he ran. And 5-star is a unique rank, very unique. You can be on deathbed, you're on active duty. You're on active duty till you die. And you still have your staff. You still have all the prerequisites you'd have. And so I don't know. Ike was very, very well known and liked on the Hill, of course. Great hero. And so was Dirksen. I believe it was Dirksen. I hate to swear to that on a stack of Bible, but I believe it was Dirksen. Anyhow, it was one of our Illinois senators. And he gave up the perks of presidents to get his 5 stars back. And was he happy? So then, then they could not call him Mr., but General. That's a story I've never told, but it's true. And it's not that anything I did, but I did suggest it. So.
Was there any other famous generals that you, being at that area, like Montgomery, Patton, anybody, did you?
Patton at a distance, but Patton stayed completely away from SHAEF headquarters. Completely away. If he did come in, it's because they called him in to bawl him out to tell him, you know, you shot your mouth off too much, you did this, you did that. He was the greatest general that I think we've ever had as far as with the troops and conquering things and getting it done. But he was no politician, of course. We'd see him at a distance, but rarely did he come around there. Bradley we saw, they called him the soldiers general, and I flew back with him one time to Paris to pick up new specs. And it's a comical story, it's true also. As I told you, I forgot the bad thing, I remember the funny thing. Bradley, of course, was well liked, and he was on the plane, and so was Lucius D. Clay, C-L-A-Y. He was Ike's deputy. He was 4-star deputy. And he ran around like a GI. He didn't have his stars on his epaulets. He had his 4 just on his collar on either side. He had GI OD pants. He had jump boots like I always wore. And we got off of the plane and walked in, and he said to me, Clay said, you know where I can get a good cup of coffee? I said, yeah, we put in a coffee bar here at Horley, and I'll take you over there. Here comes some second lieutenant just over from the States, and he's wearing his pinks and greens, which he shouldn't have been in the combat zone, and he's carrying a swagger stick. No, for anybody under major, you know. And he walks up behind Clay, and he taps him on the shoulder, and he said, soldier, you're in communication zone, and back here we wear a tie and we polish our shoes. Who do you think you're talking to? Clay turned around, and there's those 4 stars going on and off. And he said, I'll tell you, soldier, he said, I hardly ever talk to anybody, because he said, if you don't know, I'm Lucius D. Clay, and the only man I take orders from is Dwight David Eisenhower, who you may have heard of. And he didn't chew him out anymore than that, walked off, and I said, you didn't give him fists? He said, he'll suffer. So just knowing that he'd been dressed down by 4-star general. So I remember Clay, very, very common kind of, so a very good man. He sort of faded in the picture after the war when I come back, he took over for a brief period, and then he just seemed to, like as MacArthur said, he just faded away. Lucius D. Clay, great man, but the people like Bradley, once in a while I would see him, but not the rest of them. It was such a small group. As I said, it was just a battalion for all of Europe. When I almost got in, even when we were ready to come back, I thought and finish some of our work, and I hadn't finished up yet, and the Japanese hadn't surrendered. I thought for sure they would pull one of my outfits and have a delay en route across the United States and then end up, in the Pacific Theater, which I had no desire to be in the Pacific Theater. The Germans were bad enough, but the Japanese were terrible. So we lucked out on that. We didn't have to get in there.
So again, when did you were the occupation force?
Till 1946. I came back in April of 46.
April of 46.
That's
okay.
why I have the occupation.
Right.
Okay. But this one I like so well because of the fact it was actually used to make the Secretary of State's Bronze Star license plate.
Right. Can you hold up the rest and show the camera and do a little explanation of each one? That's perfect.
The Bronze Star, the Good Conduct Medal, which you have as an enlisted man, and if you're an officer, it carries over, but you're not awarded it if you're an officer. The American Theater of Operations, the European Theater of Operations, with a bronze battle star, and the Victory Medal, and the Army of Occupation.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the one that was the actual prototype for the Bronze Star license plate. They asked about the thing that I really enjoyed was the Thompson submachine gun. I shot expert with that. And in going up to Germany, I threw several cases of .45 ammo in the line truck and a Colt .45 pistol, they interchangeable actually, rifle and carbine sharpshooter. And as I said, this one is one that was given to me as a strange thing. It's the Royal Yugoslav Commemorative War Cross. It was given to me by the King in Exile. So,
was that? Did you make it to Yugoslavia?
No, it was just given to us. I guess they'd find I had the Bronze Star or something, and the King looked up some of the GIs, and it just came to me. Just came. And there's a little explanation if you can read it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, my prized possession that I have is my photo right. That's a, I don't know what I would tell you, but I've had a great life, as I said, where my buddies didn't live to do it, but you'll find me in Who's Who in America and Who's Who in the World. And even the British carry me, and I sometimes think I'm better known in London than I am in Springfield, but that's all right with me. In 1963, the Queen of England named me a Life Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts for my Lincoln work, because I'm published in England. And I joined Ben Franklin as one of the few Americans that ever made that honor. They own a square block in the Adelphi. And the Queen is the patron, and they meet every month, and she's there presiding. And I have a lifetime pass there, and if we're there when my wife was there, they weren't meeting that summer that we were there, or I got her introduced to the Queen. So I've had my share of honors and so forth, and I've had a good life. So it's been fun. As I said, I've forgotten all the hard things and so forth. It's
so you're waiting. You're about to publish another book, and that's the one on the surgeons, or
the one that's coming out will be the one on Lincoln and his Pittsfield friends.
Oh, that's right.
Which included John Milton Hay, Assistant Secretary to Lincoln in the War Cabinet, in the White House. Went to school there, which I've discovered for a while, living with his uncle Milton Hay, who was Lincoln's first law student here in Springfield, well documented. And it should be about in proof stage now in the next few weeks, my publisher tells me. But the one I enjoyed doing was Lincoln's surgeons at the assassination. And I found so many new things in there, even about Dr. Leal, the first surgeon to reach Lincoln in the box. And always before, they would start his life about the time that he's in the service as a volunteer medical officer. And I've been lucky to find his own manuscripts and trace his life back to then. Fascinating person. He came to America as a 16-year-old farm boy from England, fell in love with the daughter of a shipping magnate in New York who had plenty of money, married her and became an officer on one of his father-in-law's ships. But when his son was 9 months old, the father of Leal died. And of course, a woman with money and good looks shouldn't stay single very long. And she immediately married a man who had a post as director of the Marine Hospital in Portland, Maine. And he wasn't a physician, but being the director, Dr. Leal, as a young man, followed him around, and eventually his mother had him in pharmacy school when he was 15 or 16 and private medical school, and then he joined the medical cadet program, got his MD while being in the service as a cadet. And then just about 5 or 6 days before Lincoln was shot, he finally got his commission as a surgeon. But he'd had so much experience in those wartime hospitals with wounded, so Lincoln couldn't have had a better surgeon to even though he's a young man and just been commissioned. His background was very terrific, very terrific. So,
Well, after that book, what's next?
well, I think I'll revise my history of the Lincoln home. She and I together wrote the history of the old state capitol, where she worked for 41 years. But she chickened out after 41 and retired. So, I'd like to revise that and put a chapter on the family that I've researched that lived just outside of the Lincoln home area, the Dinkles, and add that as a chapter of the book because it's so important. Philip Dinkle, the oldest son, actually lived in the Lincoln home as a servant, and he was in the census, there's no doubt about that. And Lincoln writes checks to his mother, we have, paying her for that service. And I recently discovered that he had a younger brother, George Dinkle. And Dinkle was in the Union Army, and while in Memphis, he writes the president, the letter still exists, and he talks about Philip and what Philip is doing and what he was doing, and sends best wishes to Mrs. Lincoln and all that stuff, which had never been seen. So I think it'll add a good bit to the chapter. So I like research, as you can see, and I like the new things. I generally don't write a book about Lincoln, the 16th president, and merely take 3 other books and do my take on it. I like the new things. So she helped me so much on our history. We're co-authors on the old Capitol. And then I did the book on what Lincoln ate called The Taste is in My Mouth Alone. And it's, as I said, it's 8 or 9 books I've done. I did Lincoln the Rail Splitter too one time. When they did the book Mary Lincoln Enigma, I did that real long chapter on Mary Lincoln's travels from my own file. So later this afternoon at 4, I'm going to talk to the Washington, D.C. Lincoln group. They're in town on a tour. And I'm an honorary member there because when the sesquicentennial came, the national group actually did something, and they wanted some lasting thing to be left to mark this sesquicentennial. So the Lincoln group suggested they do Lincoln Day by Day during the war years. Harry Pratt and the group here in Springfield had never gone beyond 1861 when he was elected and took office. So the Lincoln group is mostly responsible for that. So they're on a tour now, and I'll talk to them and show them my medal. I think I still got it in there because we'll leave from here and go over there. Congress was so tickled that we did that. I put it in here because I'd be going from there over there to show them, the newer members that are on. This came from Congress. It's got my name cut on the back. As I said, I've had a very, very lucky life, and it's been helped by a good woman.
Well, Dr. Temple, thank you very much for sharing your stories and your experiences with us. We really appreciate it.
It's been my privilege.